transcendent knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita?" Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, "O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of Prajnaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Te ata om gate gate, paragate, parasangati, bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi, praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, "Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice." When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Shandara Samarayambe Deyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha Baba Gonjo Sonji Gai Nime Doji She Obodoji Megodoji Shewa Doji Ragi Baji Medumbe Judanji Jeling Goryezo Gerin Donya Jejoji Wada Medon Nube Yendan Yewadan Don Barun Jim Bunzun Zun Yoji Jaji De Yare Na De Le Yo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready. Shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Gam Niratayami. Jadan Zaji Janam La Janju Badu Dani Yasuji Nagi Chunye Ji Peso Namji Jola Benji Zanye Rubarjo Jadan Zaji Janam La Janju Badu Dani Yasuji Nagi Chunye Ji Peso Namji Jola Benji Zanye Rubarjo Jadan Zaji Janam La Janju Badu Dani Yasuji Nagi Jinye Ji Peso Namji Jola Benji Zanye Rubarjo.
Oya danga tu de lange la je ta shenye de tu ta de ne lo je da shenye ba ni de ne lo je da shenye ba de la ta yi de la je ba le bi ko wa wa de je bu chung de tu mo ma je wa de ta yi de la je ba le bi ko wa ne bu je da le bi tu ne bu je da le bi tu da chung de tu mo ma je mo lo je bu tu da de da tu mo la je bi la je ba lo je bu tu zong le 총무도 도모 라지자 올로자비스 텔라 삼바자 하모도 삼바도 집체 로두 세와스 너무 말베타 삼바자 왕고 들라 지된 샤마 되니 줄지바다 지된 샤마 디터 템바스 니레 단지된 샤마 디터 템바들 정도도 렌데니가 정도 사지로와 달렌데 꿀렌 말베 야
So, again, we are looking at Lama Tsong-kha-pa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the commentary on Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. And if we look at the outline, we find that it is as follows. It begins with how to rely upon the teacher, that is the root of the path, and then the second category of how students train their minds after having relied upon the teacher. Under the category of how students train their minds after having relied upon the teacher, we find two categories: an exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, and then a second category of how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. Under the category of how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, we find three major headings: training the mind in the stage of the past shared in common with beings of small capacity, training the mind in the stage of the past shared in common with beings of medium capacity, capacity, and training the mind in the stage of the path for beings of great capacity. Under the first major heading, we find of training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of small capacity, we have three categories: the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, the measure of the attitude of a person of small capacity, and then dispelling any misconceptions related to a person of small capacity. Under that first category, the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, we find two points that are made: developing the state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, and then the second category of relying on a means or a method for achieving happiness in one's next life. Under the category of relying on a means or a method of achieving happiness in one's next life, we find two major headings. First, refuge, and then second, karma and its results. And we've finished the refuge section, and now we're beginning to deal with karma and its results. Lesser.
What the and the rosing and what the child was.
So we've completed the section that deals with taking refuge. So what does taking refuge mean? We look at the prayer, I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So we went over what this means in great detail. We went over it according to the four categories we find in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, to begin with the causes for going for refuge. Based on that, the objects to which you go for refuge to, how to go for refuge, and then the precepts or advices related to refuge. So we've completed that section, and if you can think about it in this full way, then you'll understand it very well. We stated many benefits of refuge.
And what the Sejak Loju Maribu, what the Loju to Sultana, and the Gazu San Pedro, and the Gazu Jul Jawatuma, Tatipa the Sajavi, Nyawale, Nyawa Jiji Dang, Nasun Jiji Lemon, what the John to Seva, you know, to Tanaman, Hatel Tayana, Nasul Tama, Jusia.
And we saw the many benefits of going for refuge, and we find it related in the Shantideva's Compendium of Trainings, where he shows the benefit of going for refuge, where he tells the story of the pig's tail, or the story of the pig. And this story shows where God, who recognized that he was going to be reborn as a pig in the lower realms, and went to Indra to ask advice on how he could end this fact. He did not want to have to be reborn in the animal realm. And Indra told this god to go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And by going for refuge, he did not have to experience the rebirth as the pig. He was actually born into Ganden, into the higher realms. So we find this story related in Shantideva's Compendium of Trainings. So if we relate this story to ourselves, since beginningless time, we have accumulated mass amounts of karma and engaged mass amounts of karma because we have engaged in many non-virtuous activities. So we have massive amounts of negative karma that will produce rebirths into the hell realms, that will produce rebirths into the lower realms of cyclic existence. So if we're able to go for refuge, then we can purify some of these future negativities or these future negative experiences.
Nimba, Dele Taji, Ishi Debajebala, Sun Sarwa, Ishi Debajebala Sun, Lende Shesambatan, Sheda to Zambatan, San and Jodu Shatu Laws, Saji Sun to Lende, Raswan, or the Kuzu each
So then so we'll go to the section on karma. Begins on page 209. So when we look at this section on karma, there are three different sections or three different divisions that in the outline that deal with deal with karma. So we've completed the section on refuge, the entrance into the teachings, and now we're dealing with the section on karma. So the section on karma has the major heading, which is developing the faith and conviction. The faith of conviction that is the root of all temporary happiness and certain goodness. So this is the major heading. And then we have three categories. Reflecting on karma and its effects in general. Reflecting on the distinctions among the varieties of karma. And then how to engage in virtue and turn away from non-virtue after you have reflected on karma and its effects in general and in detail. And I feel that second category we could also translate it in a different way, where it's reflection on karma and its results with specifics. Because the first is in general, and then the next is shedrag, which is a specific or particulars. So reflection specific on the specifics of karma and its results, and then that last category of how to engage in virtue and turn away from non-virtue after you've reflected on karma and its effects in general and in detail. So here we find this general and detail in this third part, and I think that's specific. So those are the three categories. So the first category, reflecting on karma and its results and in general, begins. It's divided into two categories: the actual way in which you reflect in general, and reflecting on distinctions among the varieties of karma. Or reflecting on it specifically. When we look at this first category, the actual way to reflect in general, we find that there are 4 points that are made. So this will be the first time going through it, and we'll go through it more times. So any changes in vocabulary, we'll get a consistent vocabulary as we go, just in case there's any changes. So we have the 4 categories: the certainty of karma, the magnification of karma, not experience the effects of actions that you do not do, and the actions you have done do not perish. So these are the 4 categories under the major heading of reflecting on karma and its results in general. So this first category, so we find when we're dealing with this first point, the certainty of karma, is that virtue necessarily causes happiness and non-virtue necessarily causes suffering. Virtuous actions do not give rise to suffering, and non-virtuous actions do not give rise to happiness. Here, this is what we begin to deal with in this section, that of 4 categories that begins with the first category, the certainty of karma. So the second category, the magnification of karma, means that the karma will increase after it has been accumulated. And here we see this is an inner increase or an inner magnification. And if we look at an outer magnification, we see, if we look at a tree, if we look at its small causes and conditions that produce this very large thing, we see it, that is very similar to the way that magnification of the karma we accumulate grows. How the karma that we accumulate grows or magnifies into a much larger experience.
다 레 마제 바다 마제 바소도 기레 마제 바이나 도와도 쳐 말스 디비레도 마제나 동에도 쳐 말스 안네 레 제바 주면서 기레도 마기레 사사바이나 안네 냐부 도저 상고 샤도는 제바이나 다가레마도 샤도 마제 바이나 예지 메지 동에도 용거레스 안네 콘도 로타가 마뉴바이나 안네 기레게 제부데 도와도 냐바도 용거레스 레시바 주면서 그거 되게 말해
Control down. This Tamagari Sumpre. Aje Abu.
기레들 내제들 컨트롤 로다 말해 컨트롤 로다 기레라 도와지는 데 받는 거로 어제 우테 마주 봐
Oh, less so. Let's go and get so.
추석 말했어
Yeah. So the next category, not experiencing the effects of actions that you did not do. If you do not accumulate virtue, you will not experience the effect of happiness. If you do not accumulate non-virtue, you will not experience the effect which is suffering. So you won't experience the effects of actions that you do not do. So virtue causing happiness, non-virtue causing suffering. That the actions you have done do not perish. That if you have created virtuous and non-virtuous karma, these will not perish unless they have been purified by a practice such as confession and utilizing a practice such as the four opponent powers. So if one applies the four opponent powers to some specific non-virtues, then are able to purify them. But if this has not been done, then one will experience the effects of it. In the same way that our virtue can be eradicated by anger and wrong views. So the four opponent powers can eradicate our non-virtue in a similar way.
당아줄레라리 첨보데 사진도안도 구제 인치테나 니바들레 타지지 자와 이시지 대바지 발라스 이시 렌딜라 이치 대바드 마르바 이 렌딜라 이치 대바데 들레 타지 자와 인스 덴루이 자와레 타비 자와레 사지 공도 자와 들레 타지 자와 렌딜라 이치 대바사 덴바레
So here it says developing faith, the faith of conviction that is the root of all temporary happiness and certain goodness. So here, the faith and conviction is in karma and its results. So one is developing this faith of conviction in karma and its results. And this faith of conviction is the root of all temporary happiness and certain goodness. So temporary happiness, speaking of the happiness in the within cyclic existence in the higher realms and so forth, and then certain goodness, referring to liberation and complete Buddhahood. So here, the root of all forms of happiness, from the higher realm rebirths to the liberation to complete Buddhahood, is faith and conviction in karma and its results.
What that Delhi Tanji that's Sajino Sundo and the Tungua.
Okay, so let's say
Lendesha Samba, Shedatu Samba, Son and Judusha to Sonje, that Mambashi Sambala, Mutan, Susu Shete, some Sajini Jigdua, Mutilta, what Mutan, Susu Samba, Che, that Lendesha Samba Mutila, Jirova. Les n'habitués, les petits, les majiba de Macheba, Sheba Chumazaba, what is it, Marba? What any without college,
So this first category, developing the faith of conviction that is the root of all temporary happiness and certain goodness, we find there are the three major headings: reflecting on karma and its results in general, reflecting on karma and its results specifically, and then how to engage in virtue and turn away from non-virtue after you have reflected on karma and its effects in general and in specifically. So these are the three categories, and it begins with reflecting on karma and its effects in general, and it's divided into two categories: the actual way to reflect in general and reflecting. So it's divided into these three categories. Divided into these two categories: the actual way in which to reflect in general, reflecting on the distinctions among the varieties of karma. So we get to this first category, the actual way in which to reflect in general. And there are these 4 points. So we're looking now at the Great Treatise. And just for everyone to be aware, this first page in the karma section is actually in the last section of the refuge in the Tibetan. So we already went over it. So that's why it seems like we're skipping a section. We went over it in the last class. So that was the section that I went through, and it's in here. So we just kind of, Rinpoche read through it quickly, and then class ended. So if anyone wants to reference back, that's the section from the class before. It's just on the next page in the karma section. And then going back to the actual way in which to reflect in general, we find the 4 categories: the certainty of karma, the magnification of karma, not experiencing the effects of actions that you do not do, and that the actions you have done do not perish. So these are the 4 categories.
What that lays again, that Navasanji lays again there, and Tutamaji or Tutamaji, Nanta, Lujile, Nagile, Nibute, and the zoo is again there, Shidamawatan, Oma Tanjuani, Shidamawat, Oma Tanjuani, Lujile, the Nagile, Nibute, zoo is. And Tengoma Raju Baji, Sansan Baji, Dudu Baji, or the Suga Sambi Lays, Sanju Samba. Samba
Okay, intention.
Monshi Mezo de Tanju Jang, Dudu Bas Bon Sambandus, Lage Monte, Monte, Shirama Zo in Sagres, Shirama Zo in Samaze, Tanju Jang Zo in Lagres, Tanju Jang. Dudu Basu, Pung Samba.
Pamba.
Dudu Basu, Pung Samba, and Kasure. Tuan Dushi Samba, the Ilashi, the Rebecca, Gundugang, Samba says me. Lacing and what Samba the Jagaris, Luigi Lepon Samba, Nag Lepon Samba, Elepon Samba, Samba Jaga. Dudu Basu, Pung Samba.
Then the Long Cabane?
Long the Nason Dua Naso des Central Gazunge and the Desert Dua de Dua Don Shogun de Jige, the Reton de Jige, Shujayo, Shujayo can no rule, and Dua do not continue. Doma Tuba Tuba Shivita, Tuba Manama Son Yutu, Nyanson Shichu. What is going on the Noluarta? What did Wag do not continue with that? Do you do not say that? What they don't do there, and push it against the Lulu and getting a tree and children to that. But don't do no.
Okay. Shuguja. Okay.
Kaji Jazz, you are catching do no damn.
So when we look at the actions and we look at them according to the tenet systems, according to the Great Exposition School, the Vibhashika School, and the Middle Way Consequence School, the Madhyamika Prasangika, they assert that actions, or karma, of the body and speech are necessarily form. So when we categorize things, they are necessarily form. Just as a note, permanent or functioning things are divided into form, consciousness, and non-associated compositional factors. So the Vibhashika school and Madhyamika school say that it's form. Actions of the body and speech are form. The Middle Way Autonomy school, the Mind-Only school, and the Sutra school assert that they are mental factors, and specifically the mental factor of intention. So they assert that actions of the body, speech, and mind are all mental factors of intention. So we find this differing view in the schools. And we find a quote from the text, which is the meaning of the Vinaya. It's a summary that monks, Rinpoche said, study to learn the various points about the Vinaya and then be able to go to debate them. It's about 100 pages, and we find a quote where it says, according to the Vibhashika and the Middle Way Prasangika, these actions of body and speech are form. The sutra school states that they are all, so body, speech, and mind, the mental factor called intention. So this is where this comes from. This is where this comes from. Then Yichile, the Tenjo Dang, the Shirama, Yichile is Shiva.
Yichile, Omara Juba, Senzamba, and then Shirama, and Duduba, what is one the gay, and then Luigi, Deba Pom, Boy Samba, Nagi Deba Pom, Samba, Yiji Deba Pom, Samba to the ladies.
Then Tenjo, the Yichile got Kaylan. Sheba? So the middle way consequence school and the great exposition school state that action of the mind is consciousness.
Nobody regime and what the regime is so long Doma Chaba number Jevina, what did nobody Jigzurota, Doma Chaba Latene, Kulun Lasuniabe, Lon Lasuniaba Kogrota, nobody regime. That regime I am using not so penal Hujurova, Tilatima. Pinal and then what the Galunda, that's Susu Tabi Domba Yukinienda, Galunda Gutula, what the Le Bombe, nobody Jima Vezo to Zubu no Luares. Pinal and Hundabaris, Pinal who you are, Migdumar, what the Pinal Nunda, Zuna Lule, what the Gulungu Domba to Golopinagi. Tila Tima, Nala Mechi, should Nevas, Tila Tima, Zogiliore, Mingtomares, Nabarijima Vizores. Dibasaki Inaya, what they reject the regime of Zuni, Goasaki in the regime of Zuni.
So when we look at accumulating non-virtue and accumulating virtue, we can see that this accumulation, which is an action, categorically has two different divisions, that which is seen and that which is not seen. So that which is expressed and that which is not expressed. So one is an inner and one is an outer. And there might be a more technical term for that within the science and reasoning. So that which is an outer and that which is an inner. And the outer is, for instance, when somebody becomes angry, you can see the expression of red on his or her face, or you can see the body language that expresses that anger. And if we look at the inner, which is that which is not expressed or not seen, we can say that, for instance, the holding of this vow. We can, like when a peanut has the oil in it, that it saturates it, but you can't see it with your eye, this oil that's inside of a peanut. We would say that the vow is an inner form that isn't seen, that it's similar to the oil in the peanut that can't be seen by the eye, but it does exist within that nut.
So the
one that is not seen is that example again of the peanut. So we see a form inside of the peanut of this oil that is not it does not appear because it's an inner form. It's inside of it. This is used as an example to make it clear. So then this is what virtuous karma is, and this is what non-virtuous karma is. And that which is neither virtuous or non-virtuous karma has its own category that is called that which has not been presented in Scripture. It's also translated as neutral all the time, but the word says that which hasn't been presented in Scripture. That's the technical term for the word we use neutral for.
다가서 기일에서나 거와줄 산탄데 안가서 거와준도 거와주 내 거와주 어디 거와주 오집에 내주 용으로 보다 먹어주 오집에 내 내주 용으로 말이야 어떤데 어디 거와주 되는 데들 도와 용으로 디바 주되는 데들 동해 용으로 그 어떻게 해도 말이야
So when we speak of virtue, we could be speaking of the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues. When we speak of non-virtue, engaging in the 10 non-virtues. So we could say that any among those are each individual causes for happiness if they are virtuous activities, each among the 10, so each one. And the non-virtue, it gives rise to suffering. So these are how we understand virtue and non-virtue.
What leg go and doing every Nele, Dibage, Tributala, and the doing every leg every tunes, leg every tune, Suzujudan, Papa Kaya, Tua Simbi, Nabaji, Doa, Tana, Nyawa Jibana, Long Siwa, Dambala Tene, Jibayenchi, Tanjine, Hungi, Leje. Gi le saba le jongi magwa le dwa nyu ne me dos ne dwa ta ne ta nyawa bi ju le lu da ma no der ju na dwa me ba se yin chi hu de ne gwa sa ben de bres ne le gwa le de bu ngen ju ne yo ma res ne me la sa chua dwa Toa Donga Tan Toa Sema Yua Happy Billing Marbe, Happy Billing. Toa Dwasana, Happy Billing said Marbe. Toa Donga Nuasana, Suffering Billing said Rova. Toa Donga Naba, Toa Doi Naba JJ, doing es, Toa Doi Naba JJ, doing it Tana, Dajumba Sulea, Toa Dunga Duesarva. Dajumungu Nayada, what then co le new Juan Pombo Duezan, Teletem doing a Mashibato.
Ale.
Saji Dajuma Shetasuna, and David Mare. Mashibato could Pombo de Duezan, Teletem and Gonala Soba, the two in Jirabata.
Ale, Pombo, you're not. Ale.
Judge Julia, what the Sukalo. Divas have been devils, the one in Mother's what is in Marba?
Less so. So virtuous actions will certainly give rise to happiness. Non-virtuous actions will certainly give rise to suffering. So this first category, the certainty of karma, we'll begin reading in the text. All happiness, in the sense of feelings of ease, whether of ordinary or noble beings, including even the slightest pleasures such as the rising of a cool breeze from a being born in hell, arises from previously accumulated virtuous karma. It is impossible for happiness to arise from non-virtuous karma. All sufferings in the sense of painful feelings, including even the slightest suffering occurring in the arhat's mind stream, arise from previously accumulated non-virtuous karma. It is impossible for suffering to arise from virtuous karma. So let's begin with the beginning here. This feelings of ease. These are referring to happy feelings. So feelings that are happy. And it says whether of ordinary or noble beings, whether of ordinary or Arya beings, including even the slightest pleasures. So even the slightest happiness, such as a cool breeze in the hot hell, is caused by previously accumulated virtue. So it's stating that even the slightest amount of happiness that is found in the hell realm, such as a cool breeze, is from a previous accumulation of virtuous action. And so happiness can't come from non-virtue. The next point that's made is related to feelings of suffering. So painful feelings or suffering feelings. It says even the slightest suffering occurring in an arhat's mind stream. So we find that there are foe destroyers with remainder who still possess the aggregates of cyclic existence, the suffering aggregates, before they have died And then once they no longer have this remainder, then this is no longer possible. But where there is this remainder, the potential for a slight headache could occur. And this slight headache is caused by non-virtue. So these suffering aggregates that that the arhat who achieved the state of arhatship is still possessing, these suffering aggregates were caused by non-virtue. And then the slightest headache that occurs within that being's basis is caused by the non-virtuous accumulation that's still remaining, or this remainder that's still present.
다 산제 다샤 주선바다 드라종와다 나추줄 도와무도도와 르제도와 나게도와 이제도와 더 참아 주간라드는 용화르스나 주 기레라드는 용화르스 아니 동에 뭐요 동에도 그걸로 megilela드는 용화르스 된다고 대신 말বে
The combo, the Sanjay dan Garshene, the Gewa.
산제 줄 도와요로
Oh, Jula Gewa, okay.
산제 도줄 도와데 주 가르스는 주 고알드는 용화르스
Sanjay.
샤주선바다 드라종와다
Okay.
안 나추주 참말인지로 타는 영화 집에 롱스부 당와래 도와 집에 이제 안 사비 고이 기르브레스.
So we find that all of the various forms of feelings of happiness, all forms of happiness arise or are caused by virtuous activity. The Buddha is caused by virtuous activity. The Bodhisattvas are caused by virtuous activity. The foe destroyers are caused by virtuous activity. Every form of happiness that occurs through our body, speech, and mind are caused by virtuous activity. So we find this quote from Lama Tsong-kha-pa's text that says, even the slightest breeze, which gives us, even the slightest pressure that is a cool breeze for a being born in hell, in the hot hell, is caused by virtuous action.
당아서 도와도다 레기 레부 초아달라 도와임 아차 도와임이 쳐바다 레메기 레부 초아달라 동에임 아차 무자스 다시 당선을 갈라서다 쳐서고 말베다
대차
등에서 대차나 다도 도와돼요다 산된 담보 니바 손바 지바 산된 지바 예체를 초아라 다뉴마도 도와면서요다 지바 남에 메유시르스 산된 소마 메칠마도 도와요 말스 산된 지바 안에 좀에 제들 초알 다뉴마도 도와요 말스 안에 산된 지비 고와요 아래 소메 고와요 저쪽은 저
아게 강gen center that soy dewa yomare sowa yomare
초 도와면들로다
ale jipa soa dewa me
지번 남에스 지번 초 도와요 말 다뉴르스 다뉴
danyo
지바에 제들
ale
초 도와 등에 가봐요
ale soa danyo. Okay.
어때 도와도
This Sarpa. So then we start to begin to think about debate, and a doubt arises now, because if we say that virtue gives rise to happy feelings, if it is virtue, does it necessarily give rise to happy feelings? If it is non-virtue, does it necessarily give rise to painful feelings? And then if we say yes, it is necessarily so. It is that virtue necessarily gives rise. This is a chop. It means that it necessarily does it. So virtue necessarily gives rise to a happy feeling. Non-virtue necessarily gives rise to a suffering feeling. And then you say the subject of being on the fourth concentration level, who has an equanimity of feeling, is not caused by virtue. A being who's in the formless realm, who is free from feeling, is that equanimity of feeling. Is that caused by virtue? So then we start to debate, because we say that virtue necessarily is a cause of feelings of ease, and these feelings of ease aren't possessed in these higher realms. They have an equanimity of feeling. So this is where we begin to debate, and the doubt can arise related to this statement here.
Rande nami
Dewa Geshe
Dewan Jiji reasonable Janua. Go Tenil Tamarve, Rondo Temba Kahashi, Rande nami Dewan Jiji reasonable.
Yeah.
Sande Jeba Zumen to go out to Golo reasonable in Dewa Mesla So
then, then when we look at what is the definition of virtue, it says that which has been presented in Scripture and was in the continuum of that which gives rise to happiness. So then we say, is this fourth concentration level, is this formless realm level that which is within the continuum of that which gives rise to virtue, caused by that which is in the continuum of that which gives rise to happiness, rather. So again, that which has been presented in Scripture is in the continuum of that which gives rise to happiness. So we ask ourselves, is this how the formless realm and the fourth concentration levels arise, and can we say that they arise from how it is defined?
So
then it's important to state these doubts and then for everyone to hear them and think about them. Revealed in Scripture and abides in the type which produces happiness. So I use the continuum, but abides within the type. This is right out of the Dudra. So revealed in Scripture, that which is presented in Scripture, and abides in the type which produces happiness. So does can we say this abides in the type which produces happiness? Does that then negate this idea that the formless realm and the fourth concentration level could be produced by it? Because we see this other point, just going back as a translator's note, where it's saying that virtue is necessarily causing these feelings of ease. When we look at the technical definition of virtue, it says that which abides in the type which produces happiness. And you can use type or kind, which produces happiness. So Rinpoche just wanted to present this to us and leave it there. Dason. Lesser. So then this becomes, when we take this further, we look at the definition of suffering. And it is that which has been presented in Scripture and abides in the type which produces suffering. So then we have to say this part of revealed in Scripture and then abides in the type which produces suffering. Is this necessarily mean the suffering of suffering or the feeling of happiness? So if we say that it doesn't necessarily mean the feeling of suffering or happiness, then we say that we can't say that virtue or non-virtue necessarily gives rise to painful feelings or happy feelings. So then if we look at this definition, and then we look at the story we hear regularly of Angumala, who accumulated large amounts of non-virtue but achieved the state of foe destroyer. If we just leave that part, accumulated large amounts of non-virtue and then achieved the state of foe destroyer, and then we look at this definition, revealed in Scripture and abides in the type which produces suffering, then we can start to debate and question ourselves, how does Angumala achieve the state of foe destroyer if he has accumulated that which abides in the type or that which produces suffering? So then we begin to question these things. And then we find in the Compendium of Trainings by Shantideva, where we find the pig, the god who is going to be born as a pig. who had this type of action which produces the suffering, but then was not born as a pig because of going for refuge. So then we question what does this mean?
So these
are the definitions of virtue and the definitions of non-virtue.
Papa yimi kanza da papa ro da. Kanza yina yana papa yimi chao, yana susu ju yimi chao. Da susu ju da papa kan yiyans. Da susu ju sikan kanda chisan dang wo tu ngen wu do a. Susu ju da papa kan yiyan, papa sikaris. Susu ju sikan de papa mayin kan ki kanza de susu ju lag res. Lama tuba susu ju de dos. Palama tuba kanza de susu ju yisiris. Undile, Pabichumatu, Susuju, Pabichumatu Bos, Sanga Undudan, Zutu de
So we have to then, when we start to look at this text, we start to look at the words and try to find out what exactly the words mean. So we get into this first thing. It says, all happiness in the sense of feelings of ease, and then it says, whether of ordinary or noble beings. So here, what is an ordinary being? What is a noble being? Ordinary beings are referring to those beings who have not achieved the path of seeing yet. That's referring, Papa Kuntu. Okay, so it's saying an ordinary being has not achieved the path of seeing, so they are a non-superior. And a noble being is a being who has seen emptiness and therefore is a superior or an Arya. So if we divide persons, we divide them into two categories. Or beings, we can divide into two categories. Ordinary beings, those who have not reached the path of seeing, and then superior beings, those who have reached the path of seeing. And we find in Asanga's Abhidharma Samuccaya, the compendium of knowledge, where it states that ordinary beings are those who have not yet reached the path of seeing, and our superior beings are those who have seen, or who have reached the path of seeing. So we find this quoted in the compendium, the compendium of knowledge by Asanga. So then when we Sanjay Papa, okay, so then when we divide superior beings into four categories, we divide them into four. We have the hearers superiors, solitary realizers superiors, the bodhisattva superiors, and then the Buddha superiors. So all happiness in the sense of feelings of ease, whether of ordinary or noble beings. So among the two types of possible beings, any type of feeling of happiness they have, including even the slightest pleasures such as the rising of a cool breeze from a being born in hell, arises from previously accumulated virtuous karma. It is impossible for happiness to arise from non-virtuous karma. So it's showing that happiness has been is arisen from virtue, arises from virtue.
Drajubi Julie Chibayanchi, Taji Nengu, Magawa Sabalen Jongi, Gi Lele, Dungan Junemesa. What the Umar Sonroa? That in Gentile, Magawa Dungan, the Jing and Tajeto, Gile Denu Tajetan, Jawa Gunto, Doatash, she's one page, reaching to one down.
So we'll begin the next section on painful feelings. And going back, there's indicative form and non-indicating form. Those are the two categories. The one that is shown and one that is not shown. Indicative form and non-indicating form, or form that does not indicate. So those are the two categories if you look at the technical terminology. I just want to go back to it. So then we begin. All sufferings in the sense of painful feelings, including even the slightest suffering occurring in an arhat's mind stream, arise from previously accumulated non-virtuous karma. It is impossible for suffering to arise from virtuous karma. So here it's saying that suffering is arisen from non-virtue. And then we find a quote from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, where it says, non-virtues come from non-virtues come all sufferings, and likewise all miserable rebirths, realms. From virtues come all happy realms, and the joys in all rebirths.
Dungayina, Dungayimcha. So the Wayina Kasa what the
Judunya.
Judung is a good better. Oh, the Dadan Charge Mother.
Chamari.
So Dungayina, Dungayimchas.
Okay.
Dungayina, so Dungayin Gubases, Pashi Danig, Tajukadu.
Are they Dugnal?
Dungayina, so Dungayin Gubases.
So what do you know? Okay.
Chaban Duji Dungan Tanju, Dungan Juji, and Dungan Imbata. Dungan is a Tamaru. In a Dungan Deba Imbe, Chabamaju. Dungan Deba Ina, Dungan Maja. Dungan, Dungan, Saji Taji Dungan, Ju Dungan, Chaban Duji Dungan, 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 Swat Dungan, my bitch. What is some?
Then Jew doing out Dewayan.
Jew doing the door to the
Yene Macha. Jew doing out Yena Sora Dewayan Macha.
Jew doing the sword door in Chanu, which is
Cha. Then, okay. Chaba Duje and doing out.
Chaban Duji doing the Dembaro.
Doing out Demba. Okay.
Doing I, my love, mother. Doing my doing my bitch.
Ah, they doing
Okay.
Okay, so now when we look at the four superior truths, and we look at the first of those, this is the superior truth of suffering. So when the superior truth of suffering is presented, we find we can categorize suffering into three. The suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. So then question, the Bechagare, Yingguatel, Bechagare, Parshin. The Dasidan, the
Dungayin, the sword Dungayin Gubage, Parshin, Daniel.
So in the general meaning, in the Prajnaparamita, the Parshin Shidun. Okay, so in the general meaning of perfection by Panchen Sonandrapa, we find this question, is for suffering to be present, does there need to be the suffering of feeling? So we're going to need to, even though in Tibetan it's the same word that we usually translate in English as the same word. I'm going to use two words just to make it clear: suffering and pain. So the truth of suffering and then the pain itself. I need to use those two words in order to make this clear. So when we look at the various types of suffering, so we look at the suffering of suffering. If it is pain, it is necessarily the suffering of suffering. So if it is the thing that we think of as suffering that is pain, it is the suffering of suffering. When we look, the reason that we make this distinction is because when we get to the next suffering, the suffering of change, this is necessarily the feeling of happiness. the suffering of change is a feeling of happiness. Therefore, it's not a feeling of pain. Therefore, we state that we can't say if it is suffering, it is necessarily a feeling of pain, because then you say, oh, if it is, then what about the suffering of change? It's not the truth of suffering. So we distinguish it because we can say that all three forms of these are the truth of suffering, but are not necessarily pain. And then the pervasive compounded suffering is another example, which is not the feeling of pain or the feeling of happiness, and it does not, but it is the truth of suffering. So we can, when we look at the suffering and we divide it, this is why in the two truths section of the Prajnaparamita we find this question posed that says, if there is suffering, is there a feeling of pain? And then the answer is no, and these are the reasons why. Rinpoche, Chutsu. Okay, so we're going to take a break. We have some cookies and so forth. So then going back to Nagarjuna's precious garland quote, it says, from non-virtue come all sufferings, and likewise all miserable realms. From virtues come all happy realms, and the joys in all rebirths. Consequently, happiness and suffering do not occur in the absence of causes. And then Rinpoche said to just read that. Less so. Less so. So we find this from non-virtues come all sufferings, and likewise all miserable realms. So we went over this suffering, this sense of painful feelings previously, and the sense of happy feelings arising from virtue. And it says, from virtue all happy realms, and the joys of all rebirths. So we previously went over the meaning of these 2 points. Okay. Decent. You're right. Then they dealt with the decent. Okay. So it says, consequently, happiness and suffering do not occur in the happiness of causes, nor do they arise from incompatible causes such as a divine creator or a primal essence. Rather, happiness and suffering in general come from virtue and non-virtuous action, or karma, and the various particular happinesses and sufferings arise individually, without even the slightest confusion, from various particular instances of these 2 kinds of karma. Attaining certain knowledge of the definiteness or non-deceptiveness of karma and its effects is called the correct viewpoint for all Buddhists, and is praised as the foundation of all virtue.
ngazo binare taba ina mego tree chigumdo ko tubijo shinda ngalo tubijo susu rendo tubijo jiwas odremdo.
So it says happiness and suffering do not occur in the absence of causes. So if the cause of happiness does not exist, then it will not arise. If the cause of suffering does not exist, it will not arise. And it has to be impermanent. But for it to just be impermanent alone is not enough, because it also has to be compatible. So it says, so these things occur, and it has to be an impermanent thing that causes it. But just being an impermanent thing isn't enough. It has to be a compatible impermanent thing to give rise to it. So it says, nor do they arise from incompatible causes. So incompatible would be like the causes for a mango tree are not what causes a peanut. The causes of a peanut are not what causes a mango tree. Even though both of these things are impermanent, they have to be compatible or concordant with what they give rise to. So it's not only that they have to have causes and that the causes are impermanent, these impermanent causes have to be compatible impermanent causes. And we show this example. And then it says, and they can't come from something that's not concordant or not compatible, such as a divine creator or the primordial ooze.
다 도와던 동에 주면을 지금 말해서 그러다 주매벌 지금 말해서 도와던 동에 주면을 집에 있는 주에 가리고 그랬어 도와던 동에 주매벌 집에 있으나 안 동에 뒤따도 요바다 연나 뒤따도 매바다 줄면 되위시 주여 먹고 위시 상지 줄에도 동에 요바다 동에 주여 먹고 위시 따도 요방어 매번 줄 서만나네고도 말왜 주면을 지금나 연나 뒤따도 그래. 연나 뒤따도 여바타는 그래.
Duta, dakpar. Duta.
도와주 뒤따도 여바타스. Everything.
Okay, decent. Thing is something.
Everything 여바타스.
Lesso.
따도 여바 주매벌지.
Lesso.
What this one? 따도 여바 매번.
The prominent, the Sananja. Okay. So then, if we say that suffering and happiness are not caused, so here it's saying that there has to be causes. If they're not caused, what is the fault of saying this? What's the problem with this? Then we would say, so if we would say, the person would say, then they're not caused, what is the fault? Then we would say, the subject suffering, is it always occurring? It must always be occurring because it's not caused. The subject Buddha has suffering because it's not caused. So we begin to think in those terms when we negate this idea that it could be causeless. Because if it was causeless, then it could be always occurring, and then therefore that means that the Buddha would necessarily have suffering because it wouldn't be caused. It would be causeless. So the Rinpoche translators know the Buddha's happiness wouldn't be caused, therefore the suffering wouldn't be caused. So if there isn't a cause, then the Buddha has to have suffering if it's not caused. And it would have to always be present, always be occurring if it's not caused. It has to always be present, always occurring, every time. Rinpoche said in English, every time, if there's not a cause making it happen.
But
it is occasional. We see that suffering and happiness are occasional things that do not always exist, are not always present.
Ngoshi tone ana shizul teung de shizul ngotsane antasu ga dune dajun ko tores tanje ba kozula woroda shizul chegamares shizul jena matubjul chedores marba ngoshul chebayina matubjul chedores garjul chebayina matubjul chedore ane alal chebayina matubjul otakna dabaramude
Lesso.
to chu cheban roda.
So then it says here that it cannot arise from, I'm sorry, from a divine creator or primal essence. So a creator, God, or primal essence. So this primal essence is, according to the Samkhya tradition, or the enumerators tradition, that express, or they state, that all of the, there are 25 categories of self that occur and produce our experiences, and that when one recognizes this with clairvoyance, then he or she becomes embarrassed by this and then reaches a liberation of some sort. So there's 25 categories included into 4 different types according to the enumerators, the Samkhya tradition, according to the Samkhya tradition. So then this is real. This primordial ooze is what creates this. Is recognized at a place of clairvoyance, and then one is able to be liberated. So one finds out that all of these things are caused by this, and then according to their views, this is how one then distinguishing this becomes liberated. But the fact remains that these are not concordant with what it gives rise to. A primordial ooze isn't necessarily concordant with what it gives rise to according to the Samkhya tradition. So this is why it's negated in this point, that it could be caused by something not concordant.
God zuba maris sang tang tu ya ku san su pembu yos malba ishuba kuruntu God chebare God zuba san tang kuruntu pembu yorwa ta namba jena wa de God zuba mar onju cheba maris san tang pembu yorwa su pembu yos malba.
So it's been very beneficial for beings to believe in Creator God. It's not to say that this hasn't been beneficial. So when we find in the Christian tradition where they state that Jesus or God created, and the different traditions where Shiva and so forth are creators, this has been very beneficial. But the Buddhist tradition states that they are not created by things are not created by a primordial ooze or a creator God. So the Buddhist tradition differs and asserts that these things aren't what creates things, but it's been very beneficial to beings or persons to have these other beliefs as well. But the Buddhists, we don't assert that.
And the Chaacterisitics what the Shitul is at the Dalai Maris, Shitul Jiba Maris, Dalimai. Jeremy Sedula, Omar Rajuba, Senzamba, Dudaba, Shirama Tajiki, Chutaji, Rangatini Jubare, Rangatini Jubi Jujenle, Rangatini Jubi, Division Jibarsuburo, their Marisure, Jenle means. And the Rangatini Jubi Jujenle. The vision of a method, Rangatini Juba maybe, then in the Rangatin Maru Chabis, Umatanju, Marabel. Dalma is yelling me, Nilema, Nicolajot in the Jibuma Marabel, General.
Tambo, the guy Pong, the
Dalma is on the Dal, the Jit to Galo Dale Jiba Maris, Dale.
The guy Pong?
Dale Jiba said, should Tangent.
Okay, two chairs.
Tangent should do. Shutul Jibares, Nebenanga to
check.
Kalag Nalula, what the Kalag and the Nova Message to the Oris, what the new good Sabin Jibare, Sabin Nalul New Oris, Translated to Lord the world.
Oh, okay.
What the Marilla were. And the Shujul is Amazon Savajurus, says Amazon Savajus Maria. And what the translation color service Masonat Sevatas. And the color Nalula, Nova Messi Masonat Ubeacher.
Dirty.
Nekaza.
Matsawa, dirty. Okay.
And now, Negatamar, Tasu Chana, Lanchinja, Hansuma Yotishi, there's a Tajan Shulishin, Treatise of Tongues. Launching Joa Lanking Truma, Jalanking Truma, Gisal Duena, and the second launching Jayo waters. Launching Joa and never Jayo Truma the Conduit. What the
Bechagare, the Druma, the Samanandra. Okay. Then Leu Gupa, Shunju.
Shunju Lugo Pishimendo.
Okay. Okay, so then we find in Nagarjuna's root wisdom text that there's a statement that things do not arise from self, other, both, or neither, or causelessly. So this isn't to negate some various views of different schools or non-Buddhist and Buddhist tenet systems. So the first that states things do not arise from self is to negate the Samkhya school's view, the enumerator school view, that state that there is a primordial ooze that things arise from. So here this is negated because there is a belief that, for instance, in this school, that a food or a fruit comes from the sprout, and it's the belief then that this fruit would be already abiding within this sprout, and that the seed itself already has the sprout within it. So we find in Shanti Deva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where this is negated. It says, I'll get back to it. I'll find it. It's in the 9th chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara, where there's this negation of the Samkhya view, and it talks about the seed and the sprout. And then also in the Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika Karika, it talks about an ant that's sitting on a blade of grass, having 100 previous rebirths as an elephant. Are there 100 elephants standing on the blade of grass at that moment? If this causes exist within their results. So if there's this primordial, primal or primordial ooze that allows this to take place. So this is this things do not arise from self is to negate the Samkhya tradition. Some things do not arise from other is to negate all of the schools except the Madhyamika Prasangika school, the middle way consequence school. It negates the Great Exposition school, it negates the Sutra school, it negates the mind-only school, and negates the middle way autonomy school. And they say the things do not have any kind of, the middle way consequence school asserts that things do not arise or have any kind of inherent existence or any inherent establishment. So there is no arisal from any kind of outside source, any kind of outside source. So things do not arise from other. They are not inherently established and do not arise from outside sources. The Jain tradition states that things arise from both. And then the Jume suit, a nihilism, the nihilist. So the Jain traditions say that things arise from self, a combination of self and others. Then the Jume, the
Jume jo the Jampen,
and then
Jampen margin down the drama Luban Shivas, Majal then Hijibashida, the Sulju Marijabada, margin down drama Luban Shiva, what to Golo Juju Marijabata.
So then the causeless is the negation, things do not arise from neither, or causelessly is negated to negate the Jain tradition, who state that even the beautiful colors of various colors of a peacock don't have any individual causes. They're just the colors of a peacock. So there is the idea in the Jain tradition of that things arise causelessly. Okay, so come on.
What the Majal Tun Dramanamo, the Zuki Mar Jimmy, Jampen.
So the nihilists believe that things do not arise from the self. Going back to the Shantideva quote, I didn't find it in here, but the consequence that Shantideva states to the Samkhya tradition, I wanted to do it from the text, but the consequence that he states is that if one is eating food, is the filth already within the food? So like if the food produces filth, is that filth already present within the food? Or is that what you're eating when you're eating food, filth simultaneously? So that is presented, and Shantideva presents it to negate this idea of the Samkhya tradition.
What is what that Matthew Julie Jeva Maratu, Tonjo Sule, Matthew Julie Jeva Mayes, the water doing to so, maybe. Na ju kale che barsna gemegi le chele dudu chetans dudu chete gile ta magi le chele che bares dwa do dengan ha subate dwa ha subate ne dwa ha subale che bare dengan ha subate diban ha subale che bares dudu chetan dudu chebara ha suba na ja le ni che cheba ha subale chongse ja 마초가 소순 종유 레데 레데 냐바제나 몰로라 냐바냐바네 나마 산제바 타제제야 답이 다와시바 가비 추군지 증하소사 달렌델 냐바냐바도 거다 산제기 도와다 샤주선바다 다종바다 And so you Tamake what the dog getting out to use the Tagishi did. What to do some marbe?
It says, rather, happiness and suffering in general come from virtuous and non-virtuous karma, and in the various particular happinesses and sufferings arise individually, without even the slightest confusion from the various particular instances of these two kinds of karma. So it's definite that the various forms of happiness come from virtue, and suffering come from non-virtue. The happiness of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Aryas, and the ordinary beings, all forms of happiness come from virtuous activities. And also as a note, I'd like the second things do not arise from other. I'll look further into the negation that Prasangika makes so that I can get the exact, make it clear and make it exact negation for everyone in English.
So
we've completed the section on the certainty of karma, and now we are going to begin the magnification of karma section.
Shilu dege tene nagita cha naji shilu jundele yomanes. What the ladies are lepechewa ne gawa chung le jang debu dewa shinto chewa jung la sa gawa chung sa ba ina dele anna gawa shinto chewa jung res le magawa chung le jang debu dongen shinto chewa jung we nagi junde pe chewa ndawa pe ndawa ne shiru junde la men dos deyang chung le deba chung shebe jang jiden paru ji chen tang pong zhu chen bu shen ju de sa kong zhu to jin nos to sa ban zhao des so na chung shebe jang jiden paru de chen den tuen chen ta tang shen ju de deba pong su me ba yin shen sos what about the Jilu Nala?
Seems like primordial roots can be translated as fundamental nature also, just as a side note. So it says, the magnification of karma. An effect of immense happiness may arise from even a small virtuous karma. An effect of immense suffering may arise from even a tiny, non-virtuous karma. Hence, internal causation seems to involve a magnification that is not found in external causation. So we have cause and effect externally, and we see how that works. So we see the cause, so that which is caused and its result externally. And then we look at this internal cause and effect that's taking place here, and we can say that we can't experience something externally that magnifies as greatly as this. So this outward cause and effect that we have experience with is not magnified in the same way that this is. So it's showing we're showing how this internal causation, karma, magnifies much greater than in a bigger way than something where we find externally. There's many stories. Then it says, moreover, it is said in the collection of indicative verses, like a poison that has been ingested, the commission of even a small sin creates in your lives hereafter great fear and a terrible downfall. As when grain ripens into a bounty, even the creation of a small merit leads in lives hereafter to great happiness and will be immensely meaningful as well. This way.
Eda ngaja ta shimba ta lang ngaji shuwa ta lo ju ji duwa zanglen ne zhong yu se la ta ne si ta lang bu zhong ki shong yu ta jin des bu ja ba ma du ngo su mu duwa long ta zanglen ta le ja ba su ge ba sho ba sha le du ta kan yu dong le
That's it.
What the
Conjure
de man duwa.
Okay. Become certain about how great effects may arise from small actions by studying the narratives of past events presented in texts. So there's various stories to support these points that we can find in the text called The Basis of Discipline, the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish, the Dhammamukra Sutra, the 100 Action Sutra, the Karma Sataka Sutra. For example, there are the stories from The Basis of Discipline about the herdsman Nanda and the frog beaten by his staff, the goose, the fish, the 500 tortoises, the 500 hungry ghosts, the farmer, the 500 bulls, and from the Sutra of the Wise and Foolish, the accounts of Savarna Devata, Suvarna Vasu, and Hastipala. So these are all stories that aren't expanded on here, but show examples of this in them. Loju Yomare, the Lamrim Chenmo Chipa. Yomamo Yomare.
Yeah. Then the Loju te duate.
They got it, Nanjala.
The shaman la de shaman. Ta shaman la de what is do shaman la de shaman de andu lama. Shaman pantita se shaman pantita. Ko andu ge de 안도 라마제 안에 참바되는 참대되게 되는 이사래 참대되게 안도 와데 제만고 컴페인트다스 개발체부지라 이사로다 어디 샤망글라리 나로데 레페치 로주데노
Shamar Lama?
샤망라리 라리
Then Kongi Tsengare Lama.
샤만 펜트달로
Shaman, okay.
펜트다 나네다 펜트다 샤만 펜트달로 그래 오크든 로주든 나리게 로주도 가서 부자 따지를 봐도
So in Lamrim here we find stories that are presented without explanation, and we would, in order for us to go over what those stories are, all of them, we would have to look into the Kangjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, where we would find the sections on with all of these stories. But Rinpoche is saying he's brought a text that is from Sharma Pandita, which is a great Nalanda Pandit, which is called the Shama Lamrim, which is the stage of the path according to this Sharma Pandita, in Kon Amdune. The Tanjir Nala? Oh, that's so, okay. So when the Dalai Lama was giving the explanation, so this if I said this was from the Indian commentaries, I made a mistake in translation. This is an Amdo Lama. I don't know if I did or not, but I feel like I did. This is an Amdo Lama who is, so Amdo is in Tibet, where the Dalai Lama was born. And at the Dalai Lama's teachings, he utilized this text to help give the explanation. So this Amdo Lama spent a great amount of time in retreat. So he's known for having stayed in a large amount of retreat and then writing these various books that Losang utilizes. That's the picture of the teacher. It's from Amdo. So he is the one who made this text. So there's a little bit of story of how karma increases. The Jeme. Food, okay. Prachika Buddha. Okay. Sanje Jegare, Rang Sanje. Dene? Lessa. Okay, touche. Okay, Lesso. So we find one story where the Buddha, during the time of the Buddha in India, where he went to a town where a woman made an offering of food to the Buddha. And then the Buddha prophesies that from this virtue that you've created, you will achieve the state of Prachika Buddha. So this virtue of giving food to the Buddha is very large, a large amount of virtue. So this is the first example of the magnification of karma. This offering of food to the Buddha results in becoming a Prachika Buddha. So this is the first story mentioned here. And she had a husband.
Husband. 젤라지 표현은 들어가네 이나서 사직다 침을 사직다 안나 어때 사질 젤라지 표현은 대비치부터는 가네 용어였어 등문에를 봤어 사질 주가 침을 안나 사직 어때.
So then the husband questions all of this. Why are you giving the food to the Buddha? What is this going to be? What will result from this? So the husband doesn't have this same faith or the same idea. So then he asks, what will become of this? Why are you giving food to the Buddha?
저는 갈아 배워서 되는 내버드는 용어를 부지 저는 준송바 말베스. What does do?
Lying. Suzun.
디 추가 되게 산질 주요.
Then they kongi tsamba sanje zun.
산질 준송바래 삼아.
So then the husband thinks that what the Buddha is saying must be a lie. This is a lie.
다 존된데지.
Then the conqueror.
존된데지 존디 샤슈소 내루다 Chenmo yoba yega iwune shintanggaja mariba chuba yoba di sabun yonga zanji zeta zanle meba penze ne shinagi jende chungule debu chuba jungwa ngonsun to tunwa yin hoshi zeba Shedesa. Taka the what the Buddhist Japanese book. Jagal Shindu does in what the Shingi Tsong-kha-pa Salma Sud Gajmude.
Less so.
Shindu Chabushibu.
Less so.
Sanji Shijuk Dune.
Less so.
Shindu the Jachabushibu, Tiula, Shinta Kulanga to Motanam Marbe. Naja Jana, the Shunga. These Chujuma.
Less so.
Sonjujon drote debuchibu duwas shenmochibu debudle shinta kholo ngaja jan mogen duwas nage junde tele pechwares.
So then the story goes on. So he says, please don't, he thinks the Buddha has lied. Please don't say such things because she offered you some food. And then it says, the Buddha gave the illustration, gave an example of a peepal tree. It's a kind of tree. The only reason I know that, I'm reading the story out here. So it's a peepal tree. And it says that this particular kind of tree comes from a seed that is the size of a mustard seed. But when it grows, it is so huge that if its shadow is so large, it covers 500 chariots. So it starts as something as small as a mustard seed, and then once it grows, its shadow could cover 500 chariots. And it says then, the magnification of internal karma is much greater. So in the story that Buddha tells, the husband says, you must be lying, don't say this is from food, such a small thing can produce such a large thing. And then the Buddha says, well, look at a tree, this peepal tree. It grows from a seed that's smaller, the size of a mustard seed, and its shadow covers such a large, it can cover 500 chariots. The magnification internally is even greater than that. So he gives the example of an external magnification.
What the second Nancy Shiba there, Dola Tene Tagures, Dola Tene Shevures, Gawa Chungole, Debu Chemu Juas, Gawa Chungole, Debu Chemu Jua, Sanji Nazi, Yangal de Nesa, Sanji Nazi Toto Tanji, Sanji Nazi Kunyangal de Jesu, Jesu Imare, Sanji Nazi Kunyangal de Jesu, Nazi is Kunyangal de Ne. They tu na shubi kosa. Sanji kunyangal sadu, and the Sanji Roma Galon to Shuru da. Galon to Shudu Ares. Shuyu because Chinda Yubo Zamini Jesa Chinda Jubuje, and the Kozasani need the gay Chubomba Kantama Chubomba Kanche, then Alulu saying also Penshan Jimero. Say the low, said Chujun the Yen Jimero. Chutamalo, cut those in Gandin Pubaris, Gandin. Tabasu Pubaris. Gandil Chinda Yubu Zasani, Tebatabe, bomba saba chutame kan yu na do seji tongzi ji jus seji tongzi sana seg tanga de yin ro de chu na ka de monong ka ne genil pu bares genil la pu sara tanje do ne zu zang shin seji kadu jen do yu tar an sara tanje do khoni zu zebu chabares jiwa tanje do khoni zasan ye de zu zebu khoni bomba chu tama de na lu se tongzi ji lu genil pu bin jebe de sara tanje khoni zu zebu zebu yung bares
Zuzepo, okay, Zuzepo, beautiful form.
yeah.
Sarah Tanche, the Yunten Tanche. Sarah.
Maybe next year, you know.
Okay, in the future. In future, you will have beautiful
Yeah.
form. Okay.
When you saw them in what is it? Kadu Jenton Yu Ta, Nye Do, Chinda, Shubishigi, Po, Sela Sheshawa, Choba Nasa. Da Kuni, and the Nye Do, Chinda, Shubishi, Chinda Shubo, Di, Po, Sela, Sela Saki, Choba Neba in Jervata, Choba Nasa, Chindu Chumbashi Dua Les. 다 권이 상지를 표시하be 대인 저부터 코 무슨 쇼비질지 무슨 쇼비질지 다들 된 살려 주든 전바스 남가 자가 출연해서도 돼 전바 전도선 내서도 오네 뭐 전바도 봐
Wow.
다스 진다 셀라 제샤바 저바 친도 전바시 되어래 세부 tanji yi dun jong shong sa yu zang bi bomo si yue dang chu ni chu shu xie ge zha ji chu shu xie de ji ge zhong dian de le chu nian ne ren ji da zhong ba tu ba dang sa da gan de 상지 나지 그냥을 대비해서 안는 상지 나지 또 잡아도 쇼도 해줘. 그니 마사지를 맞추니 요아르스. 그니 초 봉바자마지 강제 등으로 세게 동세.
That's it.
세진이제 세들로디 카자는 안는 근일 표버스. 근일 표현 제버들래 안는 그니 서로 다질로 Zuzeru
Less so.
shape very good color.
Less so.
Then the Kuni what the Jagag Chisan General Chena Chisan the USA treat the Chujidong. Chunalu what say down with the Karagun or what then.
Okay, less so. Okay. So then there's a story of a man who was offered a gold coin to the Buddha. No, to the Sanjay Omar, the offered a gold coin to the Sangha. After the time of Buddha's passing, there were the foe destroyers and so forth, and a man offered a gold coin, which he dropped into a pot full of water. So it was like an offering pot. And we're using the word pot, but it's like an offering vessel that had water in it, and he dropped a gold coin in it, covered the top of it, and then offered it to the Sangha. And then it was prophesied that as a result of this offering, in all of his future lives, he would have a beautiful form. And then secondly, he was able to, the Jewa Shima, Jewa De, the Chu, the Ser. Gemma. Less so. Many lifetimes. Zuzepo. Then Nipa?
Then Mason Shubichi Jiwalam. Mason Shubichi Jiwaland,
the Jewa Shema, Jewa De Yomari. Okay, and then it was said that in the future life, he was born in a place where there was a well that brought the water up, that when the water came up with it, gold came at the same time. So he was born somewhere that his well not only brought water up, but all kinds of gold came every time he wanted to bring the water. Whatever he wanted, gold, silver, whatever he wanted, he was able to take from the ground, like a well takes the water out. So with the water, in the water, that the well, so the water is coming with the gold and silver, whatever he wants from the ground, because of this offering. There you go.
What the Pomutu and the Kuni what the and the Pomut Namangaya, the Namataya husband of the Lekachego Samajine, Tenjiming on the Kuni, Sanjik Chunian, Tadumuturis.
So we are going to make a cheer and shake.
Madon Shuba Jiljias on what the Pomi, but
Madon Shuba.
Shubu, rich.
Oh, okay.
What the rich Bemal Jero.
Lesso.
Pugu
Pugu G, okay, decent. Then
Pugu, what the Pugu, Takuni, that the Pugu, that Namatana husband and Chegurota. San Tangi Tangi, then Sanji Queen choose on the shoe. Shachatuba. Choose on the
so then there's also the story of a very rich family who, where the father was not around, but the son then went to Buddha Shakyamuni because of this, and as a result of this relationship, achieved the state of foe destroyer in that lifetime. He was, I don't want to, like almost looking for a father figure, and went to Shakyamuni and heard things, and then was able to achieve the state of foe destroyer. So this is a little bit of the stories in it. Sojong. Okay. Okay. Oh, lesso begging for food. Lesso, touche. Bring food to stuff. Okay.
Shinchi tsara tangche do lami longshe seme sheba tubi tar kusa layi chinda pa den shelawa dogu tangche samba tangche yung yu sa she tu chuden she chunden de le ratu she da chumba tabo Dako don't color Langachi, Kuru Rubute, this will not le and the Kutra Taji Luko, Satan the Gambi Wars.
Lelabo.
Then the good Jabanda Chavres, Javanda Chane, and the good choose you know what the judgment to what is, or the Nanga Judas on the
Then con Jewa Shema, the Jelbo Chason, the Jewa de.
Jewa Shema.
Okay, touche. So then there is another story of a monk during the times after the time of Buddha. They were still begged for alms. So there was a story of a monk who went to go beg for alms for those who were studying, so that they didn't have to break their studies. So he would go out, go beg for alms, get the food, bring it back to those who were studying, go back out, get the alms, and then bring it back to those who were studying. So it was stated that in all future lives, that this monk would never have any kind of issue with obtaining food or drinks, and that he would be born as a king, and become a king and achieve the state of foe destroyer in that lifetime when he was a king. as a result. So here's another story to show the magnification of karma. The Dusa, Drababu.
다 디바 총을 되는 동에 첩이 용거래스. 또나 안에 투영사 손지 근로사대 뭐 공작을 이면로 공작을 주의지로다 근로사대 뭐저 달로는 제게 살다도 진동으로 뭐라해 콜론라네 그래서 그가 제일 많이는 비바키나 정도라 그랬다 비바스 갈라 그래 그 바바로 되게 들려
Oh, frog.
frog
Yeah. Biba. Okay, frog. Yeah.
잡아도 마마니는 세를 고고절로 콜네바 지리저다 콜론라는 것도 잡아도 비발라 그래서 비바키 저
Okay. So do.
근데 어떻게 그 디바 주중을 비바 지왕가절래 그랬어
So there's a story of a monk who was meditating in meditation. And then there were other monks that were memorizing, so they were constantly reciting texts, and he became angry because it was disturbing his meditation, and came out of his meditation and said, "You all sound like frogs making their noise." And as a result of this statement, he was born 500 times as a frog. And this shows the magnification related to non-virtuous activities, how a small non-virtue can create a large suffering.
So in the
Lamrim Chenmo, we find a large number of stories cited, and we're not able to go over what all of those are without getting into the Kangjur, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, without getting into these texts. So in the future, we'll look at different Lamrims and other sources and see. Okay, so we'll conclude class there. The concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. To Chenrezig Rinpoche. Shiryo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of all the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Abbot Tenzin Gyatso, stay until samsara's end. Pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche, Guzi Shabi Denrona.